Breaking news today. Here at Utah, USA, welcome back. Imagine someone moving at the back of the where Charlie was sitting at UVU, moving quietly and also in haste with a bag found in him. Who do you think this is?
Why are we being lied to? In a nation founded on principles of justice, transparency, and accountability, why does it so often feel as though truth itself is the first casualty when tragedy strikes? Every time we're told the official version, there seems to be a shadow of doubt, a missing detail, or a contradiction that refuses to be ignored. And this case is no different. On September 10th, 2025, Utah Valley University, an institution known more for spirited debate than for violence, became the scene of a crime that stunned the nation. Charlie Kirk, a public figure whose influence stretched far beyond politics, arrived that day to speak to students. It should have been another routine event, another exchange of ideas. Instead, it turned into a day of chaos and death. Moments into the event, everything collapsed into panic. Reports of gunfire filled the air. Screams erupted, and the once calm venue turned into a scene of terror. People scrambled for safety. Lives were forever changed, and the headlines that followed would dominate the country's attention for weeks. Almost immediately, law enforcement announced that the case was solved. They had their suspect. Tyler James Robinson, just 22 years old, was arrested and accused of firing the fatal shots from a rooftop behind a debate hall. Authorities moved quickly, telling the public that their evidence was overwhelming. So overwhelming, they were confident enough to seek the death penalty. But here's the problem. When has the truth about a high-profile tragedy ever been that neat? When has it ever been so simple that the first man arrested is unquestionably the only man involved? Witnesses describe hearing multiple shots from different angles. Camera footage reveals shadows moving where no one should have been. And still, the story we are handed asks us to believe in a clean, straightforward narrative. So the question remains, are we being told the whole truth or just a version that is most convenient? Investigators claim Robinson carefully positioned himself on a rooftop overlooking the debate hall, the perfect vantage point for a calculated strike. They paint the picture of a lone gunman, crouched in the shadows, weapon in hand, waiting for the exact moment to pull the trigger. When the shot rang out, they say, it was a fulfillment of a plan already written in his mind. To back this up, they point to what they call undeniable proof, DNA evidence and a note that speaks to intent. The rifle allegedly used in the shooting was discovered wrapped tightly in a towel, tucked away as if hidden but not quite erased. On that towel, investigators claim they found Robinson's DNA, a scientific fingerprint that ties him to the weapon. Alongside it, prosecutors brought forward something even more chilling, a handwritten note they described as a manifesto of violence, an admission that the act was not spontaneous, but deliberate and premeditated. For law enforcement and prosecutors, this is the narrative they cling to, a clear beginning, middle, and end, a suspect with motive, physical evidence to tie him to the crime, a note to confirm intent. In their telling, Robinson acted alone. He planned it, he executed it, and he left behind the evidence that seals his fate. An airtight case, as they call it. But history warns us, the appearance of airtight evidence has unraveled before. DNA can be transferred, weapons can be staged, notes can be fabricated or planted. And when all these elements align just a little too neatly, suspicion grows. Because simplicity doesn't always equal certainty. Sometimes, the cleanest explanation is the one designed to close a case quickly, to silence questions before they're even asked. And in this tragedy, the unanswered questions are piling higher by the day. Because when you look closer, cracks begin to appear. Cracks wide enough to call the entire case into question. Take the DNA on the towel. Prosecutors treat it as a smoking gun, but what does it really prove? DNA doesn't carry timestamps. It doesn't tell us when Robinson touched that towel, or under what circumstances. Did he handle it weeks before? Was it passed through multiple hands before being wrapped around the weapon? Could it have been transferred deliberately, as part of setup? Science answers many questions, but it doesn't always reveal intent. Then there's the note. Authorities call it a blueprint of premeditation. But words on a page are slippery. A personal journal entry, an angry rant, or even a cry for help can be reframed to look like a confession when convenient. Frustration and fantasy don't always equal action. If every scribbled thought were taken at face value, how many innocent people would stand condemned for crimes they never committed? But perhaps the most damning crack is the question of the gunfire itself. The official version insists the fatal shots came from a rooftop, yet eyewitness accounts tell a far murkier story. Several people, standing just feet away from the chaos, insist they saw flashes and heard bursts from the side of the hall, not from behind it. Others swear they heard shots from multiple directions, overlapping in a storm of sound. Could the echoes inside the auditorium have misled them? Possibly. But footage from that night, grainy and chaotic as it is, seems to hint otherwise. The screams, the scramble for cover, the fractured moments captured on camera, none of it lines up neatly with the single-shooter rooftop scenario. So what was happening inside that hall? Was it all just a confusion of a panicked crowd? Or was there more than one gun firing into the night? Robinson's attorneys argue that this case is anything but closed, and they're not backing down from pointing out the holes in the narrative. From the very beginning, they reminded the public in a court of critical truth. Eyewitness testimony, especially in moments of extreme stress, is notoriously unreliable. In the chaos of gunfire, with people screaming, running, and fighting to survive, the human mind does not record events like a camera. Perceptions blur. Sounds echo. Flashes distort. What someone thinks they saw may not be what actually happened. And basing a life or death verdict on fragmented memories is dangerous. They also argue that possession does not always equal guilt. Yes, DNA was found on a towel. Yes, it was wrapped around a weapon. But DNA is not the same as fingerprints pressed to the trigger. It does not show who fired the shots. It only proves contact that could have occurred hours, days, or even weeks earlier. In a world where evidence can be transferred, planted, or manipulated, the defense insists that the so-called airtight proof is far from conclusive. And then comes the most troubling point of all, the speed at which the public has been pushed to judgment. Robinson was paraded as a suspect almost immediately, long before the full facts were gathered. Prosecutors announced their intent to pursue the death penalty before witnesses were fully deposed, before camera footage was analyzed in depth, before alternative explanations could even be considered. To the defense, this reeks of a rush to close the case, not a genuine search for truth. Their warning cuts through the noise. This is not an open and shut case. It is not the neat, finished story authorities want it to be. It is still unfolding, still raising questions, still demanding answers. And until every angle is examined, every piece of evidence tested without bias, and every inconsistency addressed, the story of what really happened the night Charlie Kirk was shot remains far from resolved. But the questions don't stop with Robinson. If anything, they only grow louder the deeper you look. Why? For example, were rooftops near the venue not secured or cleared in advance? This wasn't a last-minute event thrown together without planning. It was a high-profile debate featuring a nationally recognized figure whose presence often draws both large crowds and heated opposition. In situations like this, every detail of security is supposed to be scrutinized, entrances monitored, perimeters swept, and vantage points secured. Yet here, one of the most obvious vantage points, a rooftop overlooking the hall, was apparently left unguarded. For many, this looks less like an oversight and more like a glaring failure. And it doesn't stop there. Why did certain pieces of evidence make it into the public's hands immediately, while others took days, sometimes weeks, to emerge? A rifle in a towel appears within hours, yet key footage, ballistic details, and certain witness accounts were delayed. Were officials simply exercising caution, ensuring every detail was verified before release? Or was there something more deliberate at play, an effort to manage the story, to shape public perception before contradictions could take root? Because in moments of crisis, silence often speaks louder than words. Every pause in communication, every unanswered question, every delayed detail only widens the space for rumor and speculation to thrive. And once that space opens, it fills quickly social media theories, whispered suspicions, and doubts about official motives. The result? Instead of clarity, the public is left with more confusion. Instead of trust, they feel manipulated. And instead of closure, they're left staring into the void of uncertainty, wondering if the truth is being revealed or carefully concealed. The public's reaction split instantly. almost violently, as if the nation itself was put on trial alongside Robinson. On one side, voices rose in certainty. To them, the case was closed the moment law enforcement announced it. DNA, a rifle, and a note of intent. What more could anyone possibly need? They called Robinson a terrorist, a murderer, a coward who targeted a man for his beliefs. For these voices, anything less than the death penalty would be an insult to justice, a betrayal of the man whose life was cut short. On the other side stood those unwilling to accept such a neat conclusion. They pointed to the unanswered questions, the contradictory witness statements, the troubling gaps in security. To them, Robinson's arrest was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a cover-up. They warned that the truth was being simplified for public consumption, leaving behind the messy, inconvenient details that suggested something larger, something far more sinister, was at play. And then, into the storm of anger and division, stepped Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow. At her husband's memorial service, she did what no one expected. Instead of rage, instead of demand for vengeance, she offered forgiveness. Before tens of thousands of mourners and millions watching from home, she spoke with a trembling voice but unwavering conviction. She did not want Robinson's blood on her hands. The reaction was immediate. To some, it was an act of extraordinary courage, a strength rooted in faith and love that few could ever summon. To others, it was a dangerous softness, a betrayal of justice at the very moment it was most needed. But no matter where people stood, one fact was undeniable. Erica's words changed the conversation. They added yet another layer of complexity to a case already defined by uncertainty, raising questions not just about guilt and innocence, but about what justice itself should truly mean. So we return to a question that continues to haunt this case, a question that refuses to die no matter how many press conferences or official statements try to silence it. Was Charlie Kirk's death truly the act of a lone rooftop shooter? Or are we still staring into shadows, haunted by echoes, unsettled by contradictions, and left chasing truths that always seem to arrive too late? On paper, the prosecution's version of events reads with the certainty of a closed book. A young man, Tyler James Robinson, positioned himself on a rooftop. He pulled the trigger. He left behind DNA and a note. A rifle was recovered. To the state, it all stacks neatly into a narrative with no gaps, no alternative endings. But real life rarely works like paper. In the raw footage of that night, the grainy, chaotic images fill with screams and sudden movements. Something feels off. The camera doesn't lie, but it doesn't always tell the full truth either. The angles of sound, the flashes of light, the reactions of the crowd, they hint at something messier than a single shooter account. Witnesses, shaken but insistent, speak of gunfire that didn't align with the rooftop story. Some swear they heard shots from multiple directions. Others recall flashes from the side of the hall. These aren't details easily swept aside, no matter how strongly the prosecution insists otherwise. And then there are the cracks in communication, the delays in evidence release, the gaps in official timelines, the pauses where silence said more than words ever could. Each unanswered question creates space for another theory, another possibility, another reason not to trust the story we've been given. That is why the pursuit of truth cannot stop here. Because when a man is killed, when a family is shattered, when a nation is told to move on and accept an easy answer, the greatest failure is not the crime itself. It is settling for less than the full story. And right now, the full story of Charlie Kirk's death is still waiting to be told.